Okay, we're live. Woo. Hello. We've just had some
Hi.
like last minute tech things, haven't we? Um,
It's
but yeah, hopefully it's all
so
sorted now
major.
and everyone can hear us. So I'm going to introduce you and then like I feel like we're going to have lots of things to talk about. So I'll do that. So this is H. Arlo-Harris is a coach who helps people to recognize the power of owning their identity. H uses their own experiences as an autistic, trans, masc, non-binary Black person to share how stepping into your identity skyrockets your business and personal life. And we have known each other for a little while now, and
Yeah.
yeah, like you're awesome. That's what I would add to your bio. So, is there
Thank
anything
you.
that you would like to add?
Um, only like I feel like people do their bios and they're like really slick, and I'm just like, and not me. Um, for me, it's just all about living living your truth, living an unapologetic version of yourself, and understanding and being able to use who you are to be your biggest advantage. Um, and it sounds really simple, but it's actually not. And I think so many people now are like, I am unapologetically myself, and you sort of poke it and it falls apart.
Yeah.
Especially, in and around our neurodivergent siblings, so many of us are on this journey of unlearning and unmasking. Um, and unfortunately, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, I don't think we ever get off. I think it's always something that we have to evaluate, reassess, come back to, and check in with ourselves around, because we change. Like, as human beings, we are always exposed to different viewpoints, different perspectives, and I think there's something in the application, um, of our identity, um, and that's where I help people. That's
Yeah.
home.
And I think like, yeah, I love what you said there around that idea of, because authenticity has become such a buzzword and it's so
Yeah,
annoying because like it's the fact that it's become a buzzword is like the antithesis of what it's supposed to mean. It's
for real.
supposed to be like, yes, it just, yeah. And I find that really frustrating. And I think especially like when we're thinking about one of the reasons that we're here today is to talk about the experience of being like trans plus and autistic and how that
Yeah,
connects with authenticity. Obviously that's much harder than to kind of be ourselves when we sit at multiple intersections.
sure.
Um, yeah. And I guess that's what I always find interesting, like when we have conversations, in that our work is very similar, like we're helping people to do very similar things. Um, and that like neither of us are into that like authenticity as a, yeah, just be
Yeah,
yourself. Like we also
yeah,
realize it's not that easy and there's like a lot of unlearning and relearning and stuff that has to happen.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's um I think it's like there is an element in everything that we do where, you know, you have to act like you are it to become it. Um, but there's
Mm.
a difference in saying that you're acting like you are it and actually acting like you are it. Um, I think there's a lot of saying that I'm acting like I am it, and not the latter, because the former, that I can't remember which one I just said, the acting like you're acting, because that one's harder. That one's really hard. Um, and you often don't say anything when you're doing that thing. Um, because you're probably quite exhausted from doing the thing. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm a big believer of, like, I don't even call it fake it till you make it, because like you do it until doing it isn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You
but
know what?
go on, sorry.
Sorry, go on. I just had a thought and then I was like, ah,
Nah, think your thought. Think your
did you
thought.
want to
Let's have
finish?
it.
Okay.
No, I think I finished.
My thought was, okay. I think we also have a delay, so this is like really tricky. Yeah, I was going to say that it makes me think of the gym, right? So that idea of like thinking about reps. Okay, this is like boring gym talk for anyone who isn't interested in the gym. But the reason I'm sharing it, yeah, exactly, is because both H and I are into lifting. But yeah, you like say for example you add on 2.5 kilos. you can't do it for like 6 reps. You can maybe do it for one, and then you like do that one, and then you next time do two, and the next time you do three, and then like the next time you come back you can increase it. So it's that kind of like you gradually grow in confidence and strength at that particular level, and then you can kind of carry on and do something else, heavier afterwards.
Like something that I always like, if for me in my own personal journey, is conflict. So, growing up, I thought there was one method of conflict. I think like a lot of people do, which is like argument or physical fighting. They're the pretty much like we always presume that is conflict. And actually, what I recognized as an adult was there's so many different ways that conflict arises. And I'm talking about like from what people perceive as micro conflict right up to, other conflict. And I remember like recognizing that I needed to navigate conflict better. And basically, navigating conflict had to stop being shouting matches. And I remember some of the first times doing that and being like, this is so strange. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I feel really
Mm.
uncomfortable. I feel really exposed because instead of just like screaming and shouting, I'm like talking about how I actually felt and how different people's perspectives. I had to think a lot more, and I really resonate with that example of like putting that weight on, because now I do that and it's effortless. Like there is no
Mm.
discomfort. Very, very, very rarely is there any discomfort in that for me. Um, I'm kind of like, oh, I know what I'm doing now. I know how to navigate this, and it was more about
Yeah.
the recognition and regulation of my own emotions as opposed to like actually having and actually saying the thing that you want to say. Um, I think a lot of conflict is really difficult because we don't actually say the things you want to say. Like what we're actually saying is, I'm really sad and that thing happened, and I don't want it to happen again. So can we sort it out? But what we often say is like, for me,
Yeah.
you know and or
Mhm.
something to that effect. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And also the fact that as particularly neurodivergent people, and also like if we sit at other intersections, for example, like obviously you will know this better than me for sure, but thinking about being a Black person in like the UK, that saying what you think isn't safe necessarily. And so there's that kind of like, it's not just that we can't say what we think because we can't connect to it. It also may not be safe because we'll be seen, like, for example, the thinking about if we're neurodivergent, our big emotions may be misunderstood as like aggression or being
or as big
threatening or whatever. Like
emotions,
there's
like yeah, or big
right, yeah, like
emotions,
God
like our
forbid.
big our big emotions or our emotions are perceived as
Yeah,
big
yeah,
emotions, and even that is perceived as negative. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, very good point. I think there's an element of whenever I, talk about unmasking, and I think, although neither of us necessarily use that word particularly a lot, I think that is, in an essence, it's how some may describe some of the things that we support people with. And I always say that, you know, you have to, actions are important, but you have to almost make that safety plan.
Hmm.
And sometimes we perceive that safety to be external from us, like where are we going to physically talk and who are we going to have around us, and but also from an internal sense of safety, like have I got the capacity for me to go and talk about this, like yeah, as you all know, as an advocate, like you have to maintain that, because like I remember around the time of the Supreme Court ruling, I didn't post very much organic content that I created. I just found the space for it. Like I
Mm.
couldn't physically consume it and speak in a way that was like I need to respond to it. And ultimately that is protecting your own safety as well. Um, because like you only know you, and nobody else can really come in and read that well enough. So if you don't feel mentally safe or emotionally safe with yourself to be doing stuff, that's also an option to be like, it's not today. And it doesn't, it's not a failure, or and it's not a backwards progress. If anything, it's progress, because it's interoception, it's acknowledging self. And
Hmm.
what is more authentic than acknowledging self?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I was just talking about this or a similar kind of thing with Arlo in the previous call, um, where we were chatting about kind of having boundaries around like what you will and won't speak about, and that
Yeah,
is fine and obviously really important because so they talk about it as Jerry, random guy on the internet who's going to kick off about something that if you put things out there, how that can be really, it can take a huge amount of energy and feel like very overwhelming. And some people are obviously more able to handle that than others, but depending on what we're sharing and yeah, it can just be
for
really tough.
sure,
And I think
for
as
sure.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you. Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, and as neurodivergent people, especially, like we've become often very good at people pleasing, prioritizing other people's needs and like perceptions of us above our own experiences. So there's all of these layers, aren't there, of like why it can be difficult.
For
Really, I guess
sure,
what we're saying is it can be difficult to be bold. Like that's the point of this conversation, right? Like it's
sure,
really hard to be
and
bold when, yeah.
yeah, and those boundaries flex as well. And this is like boundaries aren't brick walls. Like they they aren't permanent. Your boundary today could be a brick wall, and tomorrow that wall isn't there. It's not a matter of like they don't have to be your boundaries all the time. They can be, but actually some days you might be like, I'm absolutely, like I always say, like you message me like, where are you at? And I was like, open book, like
Mm.
99.9% of the time, open book. But some days I'm not, and I don't want to talk about anything
Yeah.
or anybody, and that's all right because those boundaries,
Hmm.
because we're human and we have our responses to things, and they absolutely should be able to shift and flex. And I think especially for neurodivergent people, they often experience these shifts based upon their regulation, based upon who they are and how they operate, and they feel like they have to justify that to people, and you don't. Like, you do not have to justify that to anybody, because anybody that genuinely cares about who you are and how you are will just be like, yeah, cool, no worries. It won't be a problem because no one's entitled to your time, your effort, your energy, or your information. Like, you've not been put on the planet to necessarily do that. But when you feel like you can do and you're able to, and you're able to be bold, then you can. But you don't have to be 100% bold 100% of the time, and it doesn't make your boldness any less valuable.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, it makes me think of sort of like being, I don't know why, but like being in a really cozy place and then like being able to pop your head out and like do some bold things and then like go back to your cozy place. And maybe you spend more time like out of that. But there's definitely that kind of place, whether that's like you said, an internal sort of felt sense of safety or like community or yeah, that kind of safety to return to hopefully for everyone. Um and that makes me think of my first question that I sent you, which was around like, how are you doing right now? And what, if anything, is kind of keeping you going in these, like these especially tough times, I guess.
Yeah. Um, I'm doing good, um, to be honest. And I think on the surface, um, it might seem always good. Um, I think in the face, adversity does a really strange thing to me. I have a really, you know, I say strange in a jovial way, and I have a really strange response to adversity. It makes me like, it kicks me on. Um, like it literally, like if you try to put me in a box, if you try and oppress me, I'm just gonna come out like twice as hard, because there's no, there's nothing you can do to me that is any scarier or dangerous than me muting myself and putting myself in a box, in a closet, away. Like, there is nothing more dangerous than that. So you can't do anything to me. Like, you can't touch me, like in that sense, because like that is a form of death, because I would be dead if I lived like that. So like,
Mm.
what I'd like, I'm gonna go out swinging then. Um,
Yeah.
so that's me. I think though it does make you think. I think there are a lot more internal thoughts. It makes me think a little bit more about um not other people's perceptions per se, but just like that safety planning, I think is much more active um
Mhm.
at the moment. I think there are things that I'd become a little bit more automatic that I might think more about now.
Mhm.
Um in terms of like going to places and meeting new people and introducing yourself and introducing your pronouns and watching how that lands, because for so many people, I think there is a probably quite a large group, if I'm honest, that are what a term I use is politically vulnerable. So they don't really have a strong opinion, but they're quite vulnerable to propaganda and misinformation. And ordinarily, prior to what we've experienced in the last sort of 2 months, would have just got on board with whatever was the status quo and whatever was going on board. They've now been subject to more of these fear mongering conversations and therefore have potentially developed views or opinions that aren't really based on much. We've always had the hate. Those groups haven't
Yeah,
moved.
yeah.
They've always been there. We know how to work that space. So. I'm not saying that it's acceptable and it's fun, but we know that it exists. We've not like woken up one day and been like, oh my God,
Mhm.
there's a huge group of people that hate us. Like we already fucking knew that. But it's that those everyday ordinary people who prior were just quite neutral and just like, "Well, if it doesn't affect me," and you know then whatever, let people be people, and didn't have a fear about it. But I think that is probably it's the heightened level of awareness of people, which therefore heightens our awareness, my awareness of how people interact with me, or may interact with me. And it's that just like, okay, I think for me it's just being like, okay, having to put that armor on. I always talk about that there's a coat of armor that we have, especially when we go into places that aren't necessarily safe. And I don't believe we can operate in places that are 100% safe 100% of the time. You just can't.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, some places are safer than others. We like to spend more time in safe places than less safe spaces. But less safe doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily always equal dangerous, I think is a good point to make. But I think in those sort of less safe spaces, um, having to just prep that armor a little bit more, um, whether or not it's required. And I would like
Yeah.
transparently say that like 99% of the time, like it hasn't been. Um, but I would also say, to flip that on its head, as a person of color, I already experienced that. That's not unusual for me to go to certain places and spaces, um, and have to be prepared for.
Mhm.
I've always known that there's a possibility. Well, I don't, again, not even possibility. I have always known that there are people who dislike, who hate, who would do me physical harm based upon the color of my skin.
Mm.
Um, so that active risk assessment is something that I've got skin in the game on, because not that anybody can hide any aspect of them. I don't believe that, but you'll spot mine a mile off. So
Mhm.
I risk assessment was already a skill I had in place, prior to understanding my neurodivergence, prior to understanding my queerness, understanding that I was trans. I've always had that. Um,
Mhm.
how, however, I wasn't brought up with that knowledge. It wasn't something, I speak to a lot of people of color whose parents had tried to support them to understand that narrative of subconscious bias. I didn't. I learned it. I was just told that very basic, like, you're gonna have to work harder than everybody else, and there are certain people that aren't gonna like you because of the color of your skin. Everything else I had to find out by
Mhm.
myself. um
Wow, okay.
I think there's a misconception that we're all in this like classroom, and it's like, right, remember this. Like, and it isn't.
Mhm.
um
Yeah.
People will say that, how do you know? And we have this, when you're autistic, when you're queer, and And it's like, well, how do you know? People might not really be thinking that. Like, you don't want to make assumptions. It's kind of like, and I always say to people when I reverse this, I'm like, so if you're at work or if you're in a social situation, a family situation, nothing's been said, but you do know the people in the room that don't like you. You don't know why, but you do
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
have a protected characteristic of your marginalized and underrepresented gender or group, you'll know as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it could be like some people may say like it's an intuition that some people have just to like feel, more connected to other people. Other people would say like it's trauma based because like you've literally
Mm,
had to navigate the world, like, being hyper vigilant to figure out, where am I safe? Like where might things
yeah,
kick off? Um,
yeah,
and so I guess, yeah, I'm sort of thinking how with the work that you do and the rooms that you show up in, for example, when we're thinking about speaking,
yeah.
in the places that you show up, like how are you taking care of yourself? Is there like a particular idea that helps, like a person, a theory, a thing? I'm guessing maybe your dog, because your dog seems cool.
My dog.
Yeah, anything else that is sort of helping you get by right now?
I think, ironically, in contrast to probably what I've just said, I presume safety, which is,
Mhm,
again, I understand is an odd concept, but you can presume safety with armor on. So, like, I know that
mhm,
I I will navigate situations. I know that 90%, 99% of people don't want to see other people get harmed
mhm,
or hurt or upset. And I know that I've got people, whether they're physically there in that moment or whether they're not there in that moment, that will back me 100%. Um, and will allow me to feel safe even if in a moment I didn't feel safe.
mhm,
Because I think, like, for me, I'm absolutely safe being myself. Like, I am my safety. Um, and yes, there's big things we have to dynamically risk assess. Um, and I get to choose what comes in and out, like a bit like, I was going to say a dam, but I think it's more than that. I'm going to go real scientific now, like osmosis. Like, it's like a barrier. It's like a cell membrane. Like, I get to decide what comes in and out because I am absolutely comfortable being in a room with somebody who is like looking at me and can't work it out, can't work it out. Those like they're
mhm,
really. That's fine. That's not about me. And that's
mhm,
not necessarily hateful. It's somebody trying to work something out in their mind. And until that comes in, until that actively enters my space, I don't need to deal with it. I need to let that person do whatever it is they need to do. Just because
mhm,
somebody feel that thing doesn't mean I need to respond to it because I get to control my emotional response to that thing. If
mhm,
it's uncomfortable, doesn't necessarily mean dangerous. So, um, there's that. And other times I just walk around with the blinkers on. I just do my own thing.
mhm,
I don't look externally. I stay in my space. I do my thing, vibe with my people, and I don't need to worry about that until it actively sees us. Do you know what I mean?
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that feeling of self-trust as well, that like no matter what happens, you trust that you can deal with it in the moment, or that you can like have people around you that you can call upon to, process whatever's happened, or feel supported. That's so, I think for a lot of us that's kind of like more than half the battle, isn't it? Just having that
Yeah.
sense of like whatever happens, I will figure it out, even if the worst thing happens. Like, yeah,
And
yeah.
as every as trans plus autistic people, if you have got to this point in your life, you have survived so much. Like,
Mhm,
you have navigated so many things and you are here to tell the tale. So don't, although that would have been difficult, like, don't devalue the skills that you have had to learn to still be here because they have absolute weight, and they you know, as providing that they are not detrimental to you in terms of, any other aspect, physically, emotionally, mentally, you know, you survived with that still. Um, I remember hearing a term um, a few years ago, um, chaos ninja, and it was used by a person who had experienced like war, were a refugee, um, chaos when they arrived um, in this country, and they were like, "You give me chaos, I'll deal with it," like because it was all they'd ever known. And so
Yeah.
many people wanted them to put that to one side and be like, "Oh, we've had all these bad things happen to you," and so it had to go in the bad box, never to be seen again. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
like there were so many things in there that they
Yeah.
used to do what they do now.
Yeah. So much learning and like, yeah, so many skills. You can imagine. Yeah. And well, I guess I really like finding it hard not to get sidetracked and just like have a general chat with you about all of these things because they're so interesting. Um, but thinking of this, like, everything you've said so far, just this real boldness, like, really shows through. And so I would imagine there are a whole bunch of bold decisions that you've made in your life. But I
Yeah.
wondered if you'd kind of like picked one or a few, and what those choices were and how they have shaped you.
Gosh, I think you have to make bold choices every day, don't you? Like every day. Like I like as a person who speaks and tries to motivate, inspire and empower people, I feel like I should say something really powerful and inspiring, but like it's every day. Every single day is a bold decision. Every decision that you make will be a bold decision. And I think the day that I made the decision to make decisions for myself, not
Mm.
anybody else, was probably the boldest day. And that doesn't mean that I just like disregard anybody that's in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what I recognized was when I made decisions that weren't for me, the route weren't for me. It kicked a ball down the field where something then arose. The whole situation didn't really work because I didn't do it from a place of authenticity. I didn't do it from a place that was true to myself. It was literally like planting a rot. I don't know, this is a terrible example. Like planting a rotten apple and expecting like the best apple tree to grow. Like
Mhm.
it was never gonna work. Um and like as a recovering people pleaser, I think that that is that was the boldest decision that I made, was to ask myself that question, that who's that for
Mhm.
question, and continue
Yeah,
to
love.
make
Yeah.
those decisions based upon that. Um, and I think I had to take off those lenses because we're told all the time, aren't we? Like, don't be selfish, look after each other. It's impressed upon us. And I think definitely as autistics, we really take that in. And actually, other people don't do that. Um,
Mhm.
we make we take that and we really run with it at the detriment of ourselves. And I think that decision, coupled with say yes say yes more, was probably the boldest choice that I had to make. And I would say, like, even now, like, my boldest choices are about failing, um and and making a decision, even if it might be perceived by others that the decision that I've made has been for a different reason. um
Okay.
because people will inference. One of my biggest triggers was, and probably still, I don't think you ever get rid of your biggest trigger. I think you stay it and you become aware of it and therefore you manage it. Is
Mhm.
when people misunderstood my intention, but I can't affect that. I can't
Yeah,
affect.
yeah.
I know my intention. And whenever people come to me and they say like, "Hey, you know, I I want to be able to speak to my trans siblings more, or my, I want to be a better ally. I want to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And everything I always say to them is like, set your intention, know what your intention is, keep your ears
Mhm.
open, be open to feedback. Because if your intention is pure, the outcome will be right. If your intention, and you will know this as well as I do, because I see it and you see it, when people go, I should say this thing, and then they fuck it up, and then someone in the community is like, hey, did you know that that's not quite right? And then they fucking lose their shit. That's because their
Yeah.
intention isn't altruistic. Their intention came from, I should say this thing because I'm meant to. Whereas
Mhm.
those who genuinely are saying the things for the right reasons and because their intention is true, they will get there in the end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
I think we've got a delay. I'm not meaning to interrupt you. Sorry.
No,
Um,
it's okay.
yeah, I think like hearing you say that just and that thing around failing as well, like needing to be prepared or be willing to fail in order to make progress. Because if someone says, oh, that thing you did like wasn't so great, or that thing, you could have done it this way, not in terms of like I'm talking about if someone shares an opinion or like says something, if someone comes and says, oh, like that wasn't ideal, maybe you want to think about that. Having that like space to be like, yeah, thank you. That's really helpful because it takes energy for people to share that and raise that with you, especially when conflict is not really like well supported in our society or like, well taught or modeled. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
We're
having
modeled
that,
on
yeah.
gratitude, aren't we? We're modeled on gratitude. It's like, well, they should be grateful that I am here or that
Mhm.
I offered them this
Mhm.
opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
transparently, when the Supreme Court ruling happened, I was approached by quite a few people in terms of looking for um, POC experiences of what was going on. And
Mhm.
so, and like I say, I lead with intention, like practice the pause, the intention is good. That's what I always presume, always. Everyone's intention is good. Um, so, for me, I can look beyond sometimes some of those faux pas that people make, but I will also
Mhm.
just be like, hey, just so you know, when you approach people and you say this thing, it can be construed as
Mhm.
that, just so you know when you move forward, like that this is a thing. Um, so and all the people that I spoke to, like if I did, like they were great and they've really like they've taken that in, but I think that's when you know who's in it for the right
Yeah.
reasons.
Definitely. And we've really seen that with like, obviously with what's been going on in the US and the UK and other places too, where like
Yeah,
DEI has fallen away and now is like not popular to promote or, it's seen as like not good to be progressive somehow. That all of that stuff, like I can't remember who there's a oh, I'm so bad at remembering people's like Instagram names, but there's someone who is a lesbian parent, and she had written that like really recently that she'd received like no inquiries for Pride Month, whereas in previous years she would have got quite a few. And that's just one of the many signs she was sharing that like kind of indicate, the rollback in interest in this kind of stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, it's just a really
Because the
difficult
interest was
time.
never intentional. It was never an intentional
Exactly.
interest. Like, were you gonna do it
Yeah.
anyway? Like, did you do it
Mhm.
from the right place, or did you do it because you felt like you should do it? And what is done in the dark will come into the light. And that's what you're seeing. Those that never had the integrity and didn't really push for it anyway, haven't. And there are arguments that people will say that if they don't follow X, Y, and Z policy, they will lose. And in the US, prevalently so if people are in government contracts and they're having to weigh up
Yeah.
between making X hundreds amount of people redundant or jobless versus whatever, really difficult decision. In the UK, we aren't making those decisions. So that's a real bullshit call.
No.
Like, and
Yeah.
only if you like are dealing in America's case, unless you are dealing directly with like those kinds of contracts, It's just like bigots be bigoting. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, it's just gives people an excuse, doesn't it? It's like
yeah,
it emboldens people, a bit like the same with the Supreme Court ruling. It was very explicit, like this is not, when they released it, they said this is not a victory for people who don't like trans people, but that it doesn't matter because like all it does is embolden people to be like, see, told you, now I can like let my bigoted views shine.
yeah. I don't have to be quiet anymore. Um,
Yeah.
I don't have to, I can have my views because ultimately I just feel hard done by in life in general. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not protected and these people are. And I want some of that
Yeah.
protection. And why should they get that protection and I don't get anything? Um,
Hmm.
I had a really interesting conversation with just a member of the public actually. Sometimes I end up in these conversations. You have a dog, you get into funny conversations with other
Uh-huh.
people. And they were like, I don't mind, I think we were talking, I think we ended up on skin. We landed there. Um,
Hmm.
and it was sort of like, I don't mind people being, having what they've got. And I was sort of like, but what if they en masse had more than you? And he was like, no, no, no. They can have the same or less, but they can't have any more. And then he was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Like you saw like the power of his own words like fell in his head and he was like, oh, oh. And it was like, as long as they're the minority and they remain where they are, I can cope with it. But then he was like, I don't even know why I think that. Like, I was like, right, it's like there is an example of that
Yeah.
subconscious when that kind of legislation, these things are, can be platformed off. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's quite. I think a lot of people are afraid to think. Um, I think they're afraid to think in case they think something that they think they shouldn't say, but don't understand the level of complexity underneath it, nor want to go out and find out about it. So they don't choose ignorance
Hmm.
and therefore choose those views in ignorance. By choosing ignorance, they've chosen those views. Um, or you have those that just don't want to know. Um, they don't want to. They kind of know where they sit. Um, and they don't want to challenge the way that they think. Because the sort of
Hmm.
former feels like they're going to get in trouble if they say the wrong thing, whereas as the latter just, just thinks it. And I think that does equate to
Yeah.
power.
Well,
I
it's
think you see.
yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, like, you can see how if someone is experiencing a position of dominance, like, why would they? Why would they be like, hold on a second, this feels unfair? Because probably it feels quite good. If you feel like you have nothing to worry about, but it's, I guess that's where for me it feels, I find it very hard to understand that people think it's all right for them to have a certain thing, but not anyone else.
Literally,
And
I wrote a song, one of the most recent songs, like we recorded and put out. Um, One of the lyrics I wrote is, "How can the world be fair if it just revolves around you?"
mm,
And that's not fairness. It's not. I don't really like the word fairness. I prefer the word equity. But
yeah,
so many people from that group reach the term fair, yet what they
mm,
experience is not fair. Like it
yeah,
isn't. And I agree with you. I'm just like, how can you not see it? Like
yeah. It's
I
it's
can
like
see it even in a space around confidence. I can see when a person in a room is struggling to engage in the room, but they want to, and I'm not. And
mhm,
I can instantly go like, well, I've got the capability to bring them in so that they can have this
yeah,
experience as well.
yeah, yeah. That's such a great skill to have, and to be generous with that as well, like to bring people in rather than be like, "Ha, sucks for you." Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Um.
people think that it's like if they have 10 sweets and somebody else has 5 sweets, and we're trying to get equal, they perceive that in order to achieve equity, that they're going to have to lose sweets for them to get
Mhm.
sweets. And actually, no, ultimately what we're aiming for is everybody's got 10 sweets. And actually, I personally can accept that I might have to lose some of my sweets for a short amount of time for everybody to
Mhm.
end up with 10 sweets. That's an investment I'm willing to make.
Yeah, yeah. And this is what like patriarchy and capitalism and white supremacy thrive on. Like there being scarcity, this constant implication, for example, with trans rights or with, people becoming more vocal about neurodiversity. It's like that it's taking away something, and there is only a very limited amount of opportunity and blah, blah, blah for everyone. No, that's not true. It's just like that's the conditions that help that kind of mentality to thrive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, all about like abundance and having all the things for everyone. Um, I, I feel like you've already shared in the best way, like some things that you think are common sense that other people would find like really quite bold. Um, so maybe we've answered that question already, but was there anything
I
else that you
have
had in
one. That
mind that
was
you
the
wanted to
that was
share?
the only one I wrote down actually.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
marginalized people can marginalize people.
Oh, good one.
I think
Yeah.
we get into this mindset then like, well, if you're a person of color, you don't experience racial bias, you're not ableist, you're not like you're immune. Like you're one of the marginalized, therefore you cannot marginalize. The same like in the autistic community, that autistic people are also in this margin.
No, it seems to have disappeared. So I will see if they return. Hopefully they do. So great what they were saying as well. Come back. I can see there. That was
Sorry
so
about
good.
that.
And then you went. I was like, no.
I know exactly where I was. Like we think that as autistic people, because like it can be perceived that autistic people, well, they're marginalized, so they don't hold racist views, anti-Semitic views. It happens, and I think there's nothing more devastating for multiply marginalized people that come into communities and experience. They think they're going to be safe in there. They think they're going to be held because we think that other marginalized groups will hold space for other marginalized groups, but we almost experience the same issues around capitalism and scarcity. And it's like, well, no, we need our voices to be heard, so you can't come in here with that because you're going to drown this out, or you can't come in with neo pronouns because you're going to water this information down, you're going to make them think that we're exactly like they think we are. There's the honestly, the racism I've experienced within the Black community, wild. The cognitive ableism that I have witnessed within the neurodivergent community, wild. The racism that I experienced within the queer community, wild. The modernization, sometimes even within the trans community, for those that don't identify within the binary. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I think like we've got to be better. We have got to be better because we, like in my brain, how on earth can we ask the rest of the bigoted views of the world to get it when we within communities that want people to better understand and better accept people are not practicing the same stuff. Like we
Yeah.
aren't immune, and I think it comes from going to sleep. People go, well, I'm this, and they forget that they can also hold some of those same views that they have experienced. They've been in the same social circles, they've been around the same information. You know, I lived in a predominantly white area my entire life. Um, so yes, there was marginalization as a person of color. There was also a lot of Islamophobia. There still is a lot of
Right.
Islamophobia. So what did I have to work really hard on? The ingrained
Mhm.
Islamophobic subconscious bias that I had because of
Mhm.
where I was socialized. I also have to know that I haven't got a lot of experience with socializing and interacting with people of the Jewish community. So what do I need to do? I need to keep my ears open. I need to ask relevant questions to people if and when they have the space to do so. I need to interact with those content creators and those people. And I just need to shut the fuck up and listen to somebody else.
Mm. Yeah,
And I don't see people in
yeah.
marginalised communities doing that enough. They think they're immune and they're not.
Yeah, I think that's such a brilliant point. Like, it's given me goosebumps because there's often this idea as well around like pulling up the ladder, that a certain group climbs a certain distance and they like pull up the ladder so no one else can get up either. And, we've seen that, for example, around gay rights, that, now there's a lot of transphobia in like gay community. I'm talking about like cis gay men, for example, because it's like, well, we've made it. So like, what are you talking about? There's no problem. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
trying to put that
yeah,
distance, like we don't,
yeah.
you go over there because if you come over here,
Yeah,
they're gonna think we're associated with you,
you're going to
and we
ruin it
don't
for
want to be
us. Yeah.
associated. Yeah, yeah, like don't ruin it. Like it reminds me of when you go to secondary school. I don't know if you had any siblings, but I remember going to secondary school. My older sibling was there, and he was like, "Do not talk to me. Don't come anywhere near
Oh,
me," because
okay.
he'd created an image, an identity.
Okay.
And it was like, if you come near me and you're my like irritating little sibling, like that is gonna, don't come and tell people my deep dark secrets. Like, string away from me. um, and
Yeah.
it's almost a little bit like that. It's kind of like in some of those contexts, whichever group it is like the irritating little sibling that's going to embarrass them and ruin their status and therefore their safety. Um, yeah, scarcity and play again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 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 It's wild that that would be controversial, but I totally agree that it is. Like,
So
yeah.
controversial. And
Yeah.
part like I've got some content that needs to go out really soon about the idea of black excellence, because black excellence is not
Mhm.
black and autistic. Black excellence is not black and trans. Black excellence in some
Mhm.
spaces is not dual heritage, mixed race, biracial. But you don't want to come out and say that sometimes, because if we're throwing stones at each other, we give other people the permission to. It's seen as it's not seen in good light. It's like
Yeah,
we can't
exactly.
say
Yeah.
anything, because if we do, we're giving other people the ammunition to come after us because we can't even sort it out
Mhm.
amongst ourselves. And I think that's why everyone stays quiet. That's why it's an opinion people don't like you coming forward with, because it
Mhm.
the fragility of how it feels to be within those communities anyway. It's like, don't highlight any problems because we're trying to seem legitimate. But
Yeah.
I just think that's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that whole idea of legitimacy as well is so um problematic, and again, like rooted in all of those things that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Because, even like just things like professionalism and all of that, there's like a way that you're supposed to do these things, and those things are
Yeah.
not accessible if you don't adhere to like the mainstream norms.
But it's not accessible. Like, I only wear shorts. If anyone has ever seen me in any spaces, like, you will know I only wear shorts. When I was a teacher, I couldn't wear
Mhm.
shorts. So instantly, A, inaccessible. B, like, it's removed a huge part of my identity. It's not like, oh, it's just a little bit quirky. It's a sensory requirement. It's part
Yeah.
of who I am. It's how people know me. It's how I feel the best version of myself. And then it's like, no, that doesn't go here. We don't do that here. You know, I worked in a profession where you have to hide a lot. You can't be gay. You absolutely
Mhm.
couldn't be trans. It wouldn't even, it'd be like, what? Like, because both the perception that you need to make sure that you create for the parents, the community that access the school, but also those internally. You know, most people that have entered teaching are there because of their position within society has allowed them to be there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
autistic people, neurodivergent people, disabled people do not do well in that environment. any marginalized and underrepresented group do not do well in that environment and end up having to make the choice between like dangerous levels of masking or giving up something that they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Yeah.
don't believe, and the fundamental belief I have around that is that what the fuck are we teaching the kids? What the fuck are we teaching the kids? Only probably in the last year, 2 years, 2 to 3 years or so, would I say it's been acceptable for teachers to discuss their own neurodivergence. Like, and even then it's tentative because if a parent then decides to weaponize that, then it, you know,
Yep.
you're in a
Yeah.
position where you could be accused of being inappropriate. That it's inappropriate to share that information. Still, 2025. What does that show?
Yeah.
Like the only way you're
Yeah.
successful is if you have absolutely zero individuality. Isn't something I'm buying into.
Exactly. Yeah. And if there is any, you just have to be really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
I'd
Or
really
you have
love
to
to
be
have another chat
so
about
good.
this. Oh, go on.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
be so good
Yes.
that it doesn't matter. Be weird. Be weird. Do what you want because you're so fucking good and valuable. We won't
Mhm.
find it anywhere else. So we're willing to accept it if you can just do a little bit, not too much. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted
Totally.
you.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I, so sort of, school children's rights education is another area that I think is so fascinating around all of this stuff. And maybe we can have another conversation about it at some point because, yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much overlap. And I think a lot of this, what we are trying to, both of us in our work, like help people to deconstruct is like a huge amount of that damage is done like in school and in those structures that like bring young people up to think these things
Yeah.
and to not
And then
question.
our brains are so plastic. I can never say this word. They're so malleable at that stage and age. And I think it was Nadia, I can never say her last name, Nadia Whipham MP. Um,
Okay.
if you
Yeah,
don't,
Wickham, I think
if
it
you
is. Yeah.
don't, yeah, yeah. Very fortunate that I live in Nottinghamshire. They aren't my MP, but I wish they
Great.
were. But they're a
Yeah,
Nottingham-based
yeah.
MP. Posted like a wild statistic about like 90 in the 90% of 16 to 17-year-old young men read with Andrew Tate against only like 1% of girls that were surveyed. Like we want the next generation to be better. And I think there's like a mid generation that are around now that are just like they had that like when DEI was fashionable and people talked about it. And like I remember having a conversation with my sister, like people just don't come out. It's just not a thing. Like they don't, it's not a thing. Yeah, I worry for this very malleable next gen that are coming through, listening to all of this, seeing Donald Trump's information, seeing the then fallout, the cold that is caught, you know, and then rolls into that, and how that impacts not only on their ability to be a great citizen, a great ally, a great human, but to be themselves. Because even if you do not identify as a marginalized and underrepresented gender or group right now, this information, this movement is doing something to who you are and how you feel you can present and how you can be your
Mhm.
authentic self. Even if on the surface of it, it doesn't affect you because the information that is coming through, the theme that is coming through is don't be yourself, don't be yourself, don't be yourself. That will
Yeah,
damage you.
exactly. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not
And if you
even
can't,
taking into account like how, oh, sorry, go on.
no, sorry, sorry, please go.
Oh, damn the delay. I was going to say that's also not even taking into account that whilst we may not, like, whilst someone may not currently be marginalised, they easily could be in the future. For example, like they may currently not be disabled, but there's no reason that they will not be disabled in the future. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'm
all of
really
this stuff is
fortunate
relevant to all
to
of us.
I'm really fortunate to be a part of an arts organization, an arts development organization for learning disabled and autistic artists. Um, and the learning disabled community, I would argue, and I will probably die on this hill, are one of the most, if not the most marginalized um,
Hmm.
group. within their own community, the understanding around what it is to be learning disabled is so poorly explained, so poorly understood, poorly communicated. People don't know what it is. The terms are interused very poorly, but the level of cognitive ableism that that community experiences that will be in the mouths of everybody, stupid, thick, idiot, retard, mongol, all of that language that people use as insults against other people, they experience a level of cognitive ableism that is absolutely off the charts. Yet at any point in any of our lives, in any minute, we could have a cognitive impairment that is the same as them. We could have a stroke, we could be in a car accident, we could have a seizure, anything could happen to us. But like as you say, people think, well, I'll never be that. That will never affect me. So I don't need to participate because I ain't that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, wow. I feel like this has been a very bold conversation in the best way.
Very bold. I've
Yay.
enjoyed being bold with you.
Yeah, I've loved it. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I kept you longer than we agreed, but it felt like there was just so much to say. So thank you for all your time. Um, I will obviously share links about where people can find you. And is there anything in particular that you would like to say? Anyone listening to this being like, oh my God, I need more H, they're the best. Where do you want them to go?
Just come and find me in anything that I'll give you my email address. I'll give you my Instagram. You can get in my DMs. You get in touch with me how best feels best for you. It would be disingenuous of me to say you must do this and you must do it like that. Follow me, keep a lookout for some of the stuff that I'm doing. I've got some workshops and things coming up in the next month. But yeah, I'm here, and please reach out because I'm so invested in this because it's just so important. And it breaks my heart that people live a whole life and die having never been able to be themselves, and you get one go, one turn, one go on the roller coaster. And I want to be there to help people have the best fucking time on the roller coaster that they can have. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Yeah, what more to say?
Nothing more to say.